you ever seen 2 million wildebeest running at full pace across the Serengeti? It happens every year, and it's one of the great natural wonders of the world. A couple of years ago, I went with my family to Kenya to watch it. And there's one part in the Masai Mara where the wildebeest need to cross the Mara River. It's not a wide river, but there are lots of hungry crocodiles in it. We watched, quite frankly, with horror, as we watched thousands of wildebeests plunging over a cliff down to the river, across the rocks. Lost children, some broken bones, panic, chaos, some very happy and fat crocodiles. My 13-year-old daughter, Charlotte, reminded us that just earlier on we'd seen just a mile downriver other wildebeest crossing the same river in an orderly way with no cliffs and avoiding the crocodiles altogether. And she said, well, why would this group put themselves in so much danger? So I actually asked some experts, and they said, well, actually, we don't know. The best we can come up with is that this is how they've always done it. For tens of generations, they've been going over this cliff. This is the way it is. This is how we've always done it. And it got me to thinking that perhaps that's the way that we are running our world economy and we're running our society. Why do we run an economy that's so unfair, that's so vulnerable, that's so polluting? Do we need to? No. But we always have. Why do we design our cities for automobiles rather than for people? Why do we spend $2 trillion a year subsidizing the use of fossil fuels? Why do we recycle only 9% of the things we use? Why do the richest 30 people in the world have more wealth than the poorest 3 billion in the world? Why does the 25-year-old stockbroker on Wall Street earn multiples of the 50-year-old teacher who's devoted her entire life to teaching underprivileged children? Is it experience? Is it somehow that it's socially more useful for the stockbrokers to do what they do? No, no, no. It's because we've always done it that way. We are like the wildebeests. Now, you could say, so do we need to change? Can't we just keep doing it the way we've done it for generation after generation after generation? Well, unfortunately not. Because just like the wildebeest, we've come to a cliff. You've seen the fires, the droughts, the hurricanes, the ice melts. You've seen how year after year they are getting worse. Did you know that 19 of the 20 hottest years in recorded history have happened in the first 19 years of this century? Now, partly we are a victim of our own success. We have been spectacularly successful at growing our economy and growing our numbers, quite frankly. The size of the world economy in terms of the amount of extraction, the amount of stuff we produce, is now 20 times what it was 100 years ago. And if the world economy keeps growing at, say, 3% a year, which economists tell us is perfectly reasonable, that will be another 20-fold increase this century as well. So no wonder with this huge increase in the human footprint, no wonder that we are messing up that equilibrium that we've enjoyed for 10,000 years during the Holocene period. And we now are having to change the name to the Anthropocene, because for the first time ever, humans can change the planet itself. So that's why, for example, we are losing species at a rate 1,000 times the natural rate. That's why 2.5 billion people may be short of water by 2025. And that's why we have the existential crisis of climate change. During my lifetime alone, emissions of greenhouse gases have gone up 6-fold. So what do we need to do? Well, scientists tell us that we need to reduce carbon emissions by half this decade in the 2020s, and then by half again in the 2030s, and half again in the 2040s. If we're to achieve that, it will involve the most radical reordering of the world economy that we've ever seen before. We will need radical system-wide change, not only in our energy systems, but in our urban planning, in our agriculture and food systems, in our transportation, in our manufacturing, and in even our consumption. Now, one thing we know for sure is that we can't get there by incremental change. Gradualism simply won't do it. We need pretty radical change. Now, sometimes when you talk to management gurus, they like to talk about the need for disruptive change. I always found that puzzling. I didn't know why change needed to be disruptive. I mean, why couldn't we just have change? That would be less trouble. And the reason we need disruptive change is because of a concept that's called path dependency. It's a concept in the social sciences and economics. And basically, it says that we're on a path, and we know the path is actually not the best path. We know there's another path that's better, but we aren't able to get from one of these, from the current path to the future path in a gradual way. And the reason is we've got so much invested in the current path. We've got physical investment, we've got social investment, we've got economic investment, and we've got a lot of vested interest. So the only way we can get to the better path is through jumping through disruptive change. And that's why we need it. Consider, for example, transportation. In the United States, we spend 9 billion hours each year stuck in traffic. This steals people's time, takes it away from their families, it lowers productivity, it increases pollution, it causes tens of thousands of premature deaths a year, and it hurts future generations because of its toxic effect on climate change. Is there a better way? Well, yes, there certainly is. In the coming decade, we could move to electric, autonomous, and shared transportation linked to very high efficiency, carbon-free public transportation systems. If we did that, we would only need half of the roads that we have now. We'd have more green space, more parks. We could have bicycling, we could have walking, we'd have healthier people, cleaner air, more productivity, and we'd address the problem of climate change. But would it cost more? No. It would actually cost less, and we can show that. Will it happen? I don't know. It would require some things we don't have. It would require a degree of cooperation and action by central governments and city governments. It would require coalitions between technology companies, energy companies, transportation companies. It would require citizens to get behind this and really push for it and be part of it. And it would require even international cooperation, which is difficult. And what's true for transportation is true for many of the other things, the revolutions that we need to go through. We need carbon neutral buildings by 2030. We need to move from today's take, make, waste economy to tomorrow's circular economy. And in all of these areas, we need the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle to be put together so that we get disruptive change. But I know what you're saying. You're saying this is surely impossible. This scale of change in a decade is impossible, and you may be right. It will require a degree of collective action and international cooperation that doesn't exist in today's uncooperative world. Just look at the current pandemic, for example. And there are still vested interests that need to be overcome. But let me suggest there are actually two areas of real hope that could make this the decisive decade in the right direction. The first is economics, which you may find boring, but you shouldn't, because it's so interesting and important. There was a time, maybe 20 years ago, when the economics profession really believed that it would be nice to act on climate change and nature and on addressing poverty and so on, but it cost a lot of money. And it would cost us jobs, perhaps, and it would make us less productive, less competitive. So politicians stayed away. We now know that that's actually the economics of the last century. Today we know that, for example, smart climate policy will lead to more economic efficiency, it will drive new technologies, and it will lower risks, whether they're the risks for a small farmer or a huge corporation. And combined, these three things lead to a dynamism in the economy, more competitiveness, more jobs, and much, much better, higher quality of life future. So that's the first good news. There's a second piece of good news, which actually relates to the current tragic crisis relating to health and the economy, the worst in 100 years. The one thing we surely have learned in this pandemic is that we are not as safe as we thought we were. Most of us believed that we put in place government structures that would protect us. We were wrong. We were wrong. We were assuming that the past is a good predictor of the future. We were wrong. We now know we need to look at the future with different eyes and put new systems in place. We are now ready for change in a way that we were not before. We have a window of opportunity to break through that inertia. Indeed, we've seen that we can make changes that are pretty radical, such as working at home and staying in. And we've also learned, for example, through the Black Lives Matter movement, we've learned that actually incremental change, nice as it is, will not solve the problem. So we have this window of opportunity that we must seize. In the next 2 years, the world economy will have about $20 trillion pumped into it by the world's governments. It is very, very important that that money be spent on tomorrow's economy, not the past. We know that investing, for example, in energy efficiency will create more and better jobs than investing in fossil fuels. We know that investing in nature-based solutions will lead to better jobs and a better economy and a better society than investing in more roads and bridges and pouring a lot of concrete. We have lots of evidence on this. It's really important that we skate to where the puck will be, not where the puck is now. So these are two very exciting possibilities to promote system-wide change. But let's remember, finally, that when we talk about system change and we need it, we are actually part of that system. We are a key part of it. Let me give you an example. Why are we losing the tropical forests in Southeast Asia, in Borneo, and in Malaysia? 2 words: palm oil. And who is it that's consuming all this palm oil? 2 words. We are. We are. Palm oil is a wonderful commodity. It's in half of all the products in all of the supermarkets in the United States. You and I have probably used it 3 or 4 times today already. Nothing wrong with the product of palm oil, but there is a lot wrong with how it's produced, where it comes from, and how it's planted after cutting down tropical forests. We can change that by demanding change. Think about the consumption of food. Think about the beef we eat. Each unit of nutrition of beef will use 20 times as much land, 20 times as much water, and will emit 20 times as much greenhouse gases as the same amount of nutrition from plant-based food. We can change it. We can be part of this remarkable change. This decade will see disruptive change. I guarantee it. But it could be bad disruptive change, really bad. Or it could open up an entirely new way. And you and I have a fantastically exciting adventure ahead of us. We have instruments at our disposal. We have our votes. We have our consumption patterns. We have our charitable giving. We have our conversations. We have the lobbying that we do. We have the choice of career we make. We have our lives that can really influence change. So the trick is, don't be scared by what's going on, although it is scary. Rather, fix our eye on the horizon to where we want to go to. What is the world we want? And then be part of it. So there were 2. I started with a story about animals. I'll finish with one, but this one may not be true. So there were 2 butterfly larvae sitting on a log having a good time. And after a while, a beautiful, colorful butterfly fluttered by. And one of the larvae looked up, and then he looked to his friend and he said, "You're not going to get me going up in one of those things." So the point of the story is, don't be a larvae. Know who you are. Know who you want to be. Also, don't be a wildebeest. Identify the change we want and then be that very change. Thank you very much indeed.